Who would have thought, eh? It's nearly been 10 years since FNAF's creation, and it's still just as relevant now as it's ever been. With the countless amount of games, books, fan games, toys, and of course, lore. There has been a surprising lack of content, however, in the movie front. Sure, there's been plenty of fan films, some being quite really good with either adapting the games or creating new storylines, but surprisingly nothing in terms of official media. Yeah, you'd think a franchise worth over $1 billion would have at least had 5 movies and a series by now. Hell, even Hello Neighbor had a show, so it's more than surprising that it's only now that there's actually a movie of FNAF. But to anyone who has been a fan of the franchise, you probably know why. They've been trying to make a FNAF movie for some time now, with it originally being helmed at Warner Brothers. But for some reason or another, the movie always ran into roadblocks and kept getting delayed. It's like the movie was just as cursed as the animatronics themselves, doomed to just be another what-if scenario if it were to ever came out. But now that's no longer the case anymore, as the movie, now helmed by Blumhouse this time, and distributed by Universal Studios, is finally coming out. And as someone who thought this would never really happen, I am rather excited. But I can't help but have a bad feeling about this movie. A feeling I just can't get rid of. So today I'm going to explain exactly what it is I'm feeling and why the FNAF movie worries me. So why am I worried about this movie? Well, there's a couple reasons. First off, how quickly the film was made.
Excuse me, what?
Yeah, I know. I know how that sounds. But hear me out. This movie was quite quickly made, taking a year at most. And that being when Blumhouse actually began production. In terms of a movie being made, yeah, it took several years. But in terms of when Blumhouse made this, it surprisingly didn't take that long, as the main thing holding up the movie was the script, and whether Scott Cawthon was happy with it or not. But the moment Scott gave them the green light, they surprisingly got it done very quick. After all, the movie only began shooting just a few months ago, and now it's nearly released. For me, this tells me 2 possibilities. Either the movie was really well planned out so they were able to use their time to the best they could, or that the movie was rushed to meet the October deadline, to just finally get the movie out. And as you can tell, I'm leaning more to the second option rather than the first. What first clued me in on this is the studio making the movie. Let's be honest. Blumhouse hasn't always had the best track record in terms of quality, but more efficiency. I say efficiency because they're definitely not lazy. After all, this movie wouldn't be as faithful as it is if it was, but rather they tend to make things as fast as possible. With productions tending to be shorter compared to most other studios, like hell, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends were only 1 year apart from one another. And in the past it has worked on some occasions, with the Purge franchise seeming like it only got better the more they made, as well as movies like Black Phone, Split and Get Out. But you also have to remember they also created films like Halloween Ends and Truth or Dare. They're a studio who know how to make a good horror film, but it seems the less time they spend on a horror movie, the worse it is most of the time. And for a franchise as complex and well made like FNAF, for it to be filmed, edited, and released in under a year can feel a little odd, to say the least. I'm not saying this is inherently a bad thing. After all, there's been plenty of good films that have been made very quickly. But what I am saying is that there's a high possibility that the movie likely may have been rushed in order to capitalize on FNAF's recent resurgence of popularity. After all, you have to admit, FNAF wasn't always as popular as it's always been. Sure, it hit big when it was initially released back in 2014 to 2015, but then it arguably died out around the 2019s to early 2020s, and it only really got back up with Security Breach being released. Yeah, surprising, one of the most divisive FNAF games is the one that arguably put new life into it. But, as all things with popular things, the hype doesn't last forever. And since this is heavily distributed by Universal and they're also having their hands in this project, one is to wonder whether or not this film has just been causing so much trouble that they just decided to rush it in order to finally get it out. And I know you're probably saying Scott wouldn't allow that, but maybe even Scott got a little tired of this movie never being made. And so just one day decided to let through something that may have not been the greatest. Again, I hope that's not the case, and it's a bit of a stretch from me, but all I'm saying is that it's a real possibility. And we really shouldn't rule that out just yet. One thing surprisingly I don't see many people talk about is whether or not this movie's going to be faithful to the games. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, when I say faithful, I mean, will this movie follow the game's story, or will it be used as a reference to create a new one? You may be wondering why is this a concern, but honestly, either way it's kind of a concern. Think about it. FNAF is probably its own worst enemy. After all, when you create something so perfect in an idea and a story, the bar obviously raises more and more. So it can be hard to try and top it. And that's what's been plaguing the story of FNAF ever since. It's way too confusing, where before it was pretty simple to get a hang of. Its constant attempts to try and one-up itself and what's happened before only leads to confusion and unnecessary stuff being added. Especially to the story, to the point where we have to question even if the correct answers are the right answers, because nothing in this franchise is really solid anymore. Hell, the first game in the series is no longer anywhere near the start of the story. So, why do I bring this up? Well, the movie has one of the toughest decisions ever that's bound to piss some people off regardless. It can either try to stay as close to the convoluted story of the games, or simply use their elements to try and tell something different. And honestly, it could go very wrong either way. Such as, it inherits all the flaws from the game's story, or becomes so different from the games it no longer feels like FNAF. Or worse, all those problems at once. For me personally, I think for the movie to work, it should try to create a newer version of the story, adapting all the key elements of the game and cutting out all the convoluted fat. But I'm not sure if that will be the case, because the movie reportedly is going to be 3 hours long. That's longer than it takes to play the entirety of the first and second game combined. Maybe even the third also. So hopefully this movie can use that time efficiently. But the fact it is so long has me worried it will contain the same amount of story fat to the games. And honestly, with a new standard of video game movies, it would be a shame if that were the case. I have to be honest, this one's gonna sound like more of a nitpick, but honestly, it could probably be a bigger issue than we may think right now. The expectation for this movie is immense. It has been hyped up for years, and now with the addition of more games, fans, and lore, everyone is going to have a different expectation for this movie. Especially this movie. Some people are going to expect genuine horror, some people are going to expect a goofy good time, and others may want a faithful adaptation. You might see where I'm going with this. I'm predicting right now that no matter how the movie is, there's going to be a large group of people who are going to be pissed off. So this is less of a problem with the movie, but more of us as an audience. For me, I'm going to stay on the fence until I actually see it, just because I have zero clue as to what the movie's actually going to be. Judging by the trailers, it's very hard to tell what it's going to be. Is it going to be goofy or is it going to be serious? Or maybe is it going to go the Scream approach and try and blend both? After all, it pretty much has Matthew Lillard in it. but others are not going to be on the fence like me, and want one thing more over the other. It's probably going to be like the Mario movie's reception, but on steroids. I hope it's not, but the likelihood is that it probably is going to be. Again, this is more of a nitpick, but I feel that unless people keep their expectations to more skeptical with this movie, it's gonna cause outrage to a certain degree, and it will probably ruin your experience if you go in expecting something way too good. Again, that sounds obvious, but surprisingly, it's not. Well, in conclusion, I'm very excited for the movie. I hope that it's going to have more to say than just something forgettable or disrespectful, but I can't shake the feeling that it's probably going to be the outcome. It's a painful possibility, but still a possibility nonetheless. And while everyone is exploding over the movie, I'm just trying to remind you that there's a real possibility that this movie may not meet your expectations. After all, it wouldn't be the first video game movie to disappoint, and for a franchise as troublesome as FNAF, it's probably even higher in this case. But everyone has different views on different things. So here is where I ask you, yes, you watching right here, right now, to first, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and two, what are your thoughts? What do you want to see in this movie? And what do you expect to see in this movie? Are my concerns valid, or am I talking nonsense? Who knows, but one thing is for certain. You can expect a review from me when the movie comes out in October. And with that, I will see you all next time.